Good morning, everybody. We'll give it just another minute or so that everybody has a chance to get into the room, and then we'll get it kicked off. It's good to see everybody this morning. All right, let's get started. Good morning, everybody. My name is Turner Arbor. I'm a Senior Economic Development Manager for the Pasco Economic Development Council. It's good to have everybody here for the first of hopefully many of these types of meetings where we'll be um, uh, building relationships with the business community and with the Sheriff's Department and sharing some valuable information on business security and how it affects our local economy here in Pasco County. First off, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items. Um, for Q&A, so as you're listening along, if you have a question that comes up that you would like answered, we're going to hold off on those until the end, but feel free to type them into the Q&A function of the webinar, and we'll keep an eye on those as the presentation goes on, and then I'll pop back on at the end to get them answered by whichever party they pertain to. Also, we will make sure to send out these slides to you at the conclusion of the webinar so that you have those to look over and to share. And with that, we're going to start off with Bill Cronin, President and CEO of the Pasco EDC, to talk about how the importance of this particular topic and how it affects our local economic security. So I'll hand it over to Bill.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Well, happy Wednesday, everyone. Bill Cronin, I'm the CEO, President and CEO of the Pasco EDC. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to everyone today about this important topic. I'm going to speak at a very high level. I've got a couple of slides I'm going to show to get us started. If you allow me, I'm going to present that in Teams right now. Okay. All right. Here at Pasco EDC, our mission's very simple. It's to create a business environment where businesses can start, move, and grow, and to thrive. So today we want to talk about economic security, and in partnership with public safety. It's not just important, but it's essential to our county's continued growth, and of course our competitiveness. Economic security and public safety are inseparable. Companies don't just look for tax rates and available land, they're evaluating risk. And that includes physical safety, cyber threats, supply chain disruptions, power outages, emergency preparedness. Here in Florida, we're no stranger to some of these items like natural disasters. So we all understand that when businesses feel confident that risks are being proactively addressed, they invest more and they hire more. And of course, they stay longer. Much of what we do here at the EDC is to help companies mitigate that risk, which will help them to provide certainty when companies make business decisions of where they're going to put future investments. Now, unmanaged risk has some real consequences, though. One major incident, whether it's a security breach, a natural disaster, a crime-related disruption, it can send ripples across your entire business ecosystem. So for in small, mid-sized businesses, especially, these disruptions can be very devastating. And it's that awareness and preparedness that aren't just optional, they become economic necessities. So, what do we mean by preparedness? Plan for the worst and hope for the best is actually a valid expression. You should know your circumstances. If you rely on the internet, you should understand what happens if you have an internet outage or if you get hacked. Do you depend on clear roads to deliver your products or to receive goods or for your employees to get to work? Lighting in parking lots, for example, if you're a business that serves retail or has night operations, how important is that to your business and the safety of your customers? And then most importantly, learn about your employees too. Learn where they live, what their circumstances are too, and know how to get a hold of them during an emergency. There's a lot of companies now, since our time working with them after hurricanes, that have phone trees where they communication responsibilities are actually shared with each other for efficiency and to make sure everybody gets word as soon as possible of some type of emergency or need. So know your strengths and your weaknesses, huge part of just understanding your businesses, but then also know your resources. A lot of what we do at the Pasco EDC, most people don't utilize all of our resources until they need them. And sometimes they're not even aware that we have some of those programs. Take the time when it's, as we say, blue skies, to find out what those resources are. And then this is where the partnership really matters. Know who to call and where to find that information when you need it. Pasco County benefits from a really strong relationship between economic development and public safety. I often joke that the sheriff is one of the best economic developers that we don't have to pay. He's one of the best people on our team because he knows that in order for people to succeed, they need to be safe here. And that is one of the most important building blocks of what we have in this community. We may be growing rapidly, but we still have that small town feel. Our sheriff, our constitutional officers, our commissioners are all accessible. So reach out, get to know them by working together with the sheriff's office, with local governments, and the business community. We create a culture of preparedness rather than reaction. That specialized knowledge that you have about your business is also a resource for us. So, for example, if your company does some DoD work, or I think we call it DoW now, Department of War work, you may need some extra protection for your business. And the rest of us in the general public may not realize that you're handling some things that are part of national security. Or if you're planning to let hundreds of employees all leave from work one day at the same time, you may want to talk to somebody to make sure you're not creating bottlenecks for Pasco Road. So communication works both ways. The more we share, the smarter we are. You might recall a storm back in Atlanta called Snowmageddon back in 2014. There were hundreds of people trapped in their cars for up to 24 hours. And it was because all the large employers decided to let their employees go ahead of the storm at 3 p.m., all at the same time, caused massive traffic jams, and a proactive call from the business to the municipalities could have initiated a more staggered approach by moving masses of people instead of doing it all at once. So simple things like that seem like no-brainers sometimes, but if we keep them to ourselves, we can't work together. Resilient businesses don't just survive challenges, they adapt and then they emerge stronger. At the EDC, our commitment goes beyond just attracting businesses. We want to help them grow. Sometimes the best commercial we have is how we treat our existing business, but most importantly, how resilient and successful our businesses are here. So economic growth requires confidence, and confidence comes from knowing that safety, preparedness, and collaboration are priorities here in your local economy. And sometimes that growth does require rebuilding. So in those instances, after major storms or incidents, we'll work with businesses to get them back up and going, whether it's helping them to get bridge loans for until state and federal assistance can kick in, or even grants like we did during the pandemic to make sure that our companies could still pay their bills and pay their rent and to keep some money moving in our community. Together, I think all of us, though, we're still building a Pasco County where our businesses feel secure in investing today and are confident about tomorrow. Our commitment goes beyond that attraction piece. Again, sustainability, confidence, and working together. I'm going to stop there and make sure that we've got time for all of our presenters, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end.
Thank you, Bill. That was very informative. Now we'll move over to the Pasco Sheriff's Office side, and I'll introduce our sheriff, Sheriff Chris Knockup.
Hey, everybody. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Bill, very much. I just want to go over a couple things before I hand over to Captain Krause and we start talking about the threat environment. But appreciate this opportunity. So some of you may remember you're around during coronavirus. We had these weekly meetings and we would just discuss about things that were going on. How can we work together? How can we, bounce off each other if there was an issue or concern and try to get ahead of things. So a couple of things I'm going to go over today. One is the biggest thing for us is we can communicate more often. If there's an issue that you have, and we'll go into the different types of issues, but start this conversation today so that when something bad happens that we don't have to try to catch up, try to build those relationships. We want those relationships to happen. And the other one too is, hey, look, in the sheriff's office, we know people move around different positions, and we know in your organizations, people move around different positions. So we can have a relationship today, but then when somebody moves, then the relationship kind of fades away. So we want to make sure that we can consistently have those type of relationships. So I'm going to give you an email address to start with. So if everybody could write this down, it's css@pascosheriff.org. So Charlie Sierra at pascosheriff.org. And if you can send an email to that and just mention you're on this call, I'm going to give you a couple of names that we will respond back to you with and give you some background like why we're doing this. So I will tell everybody this: if there's a concern and if there's an issue that's happening immediately, call 911. No matter what, you're going to have these contact informations, but if something is horribly that's happening, call 911. If you call us, all we're going to do is basically do like the 911 process, but it's delayed. So just call 911 immediately. One is we want you to know your district captains. So when you go send an email to css@pascosheriff.org, we want you to know your district captain. So the reason to know your district captain, you may have something going on that is not critical where you call 911, but something where you just need to be addressed. So whether outside your business, I'll just say there's kids that are just congregating, causing mischief, doing something like that. That's something you can just send to your district captain. The district captain will send deputies when they can go over and take care of something. It says those little things that happen that need to be taken care of. Or if there's an issue, we're very big on customer service. If there's an issue with a deputy you don't think was handled properly, know your district captain and they'll be able to address it and look into it. The other one, and Captain Krause is going to talk about this, the threat environment, going on. So as I go back to it, if it is an emerging issue, it's 2:00 in the morning, call 911. If there's a threat, and I'll tell you, so one of the things we're going to talk about is, you have that employee that made a statement that said, I'm going to do something, I'm going to cause harm. I'm so upset. I was fired. This is what's going on. One is I would call 911 because if somebody makes that threat, call 911 so the deputies can get there. However, the deputies are going to do this, but you can do this also. Reach out to Captain Krause's team. They're the threat assessment team. They're brought on immediately after, like deputies will ride there. If somebody says, I'm going to shoot up whatever location it is, your business, the deputies are going to go lights and sirens. They're going to get there. We're going to address the situation. But then they're going to reach out to threat assessment. But also, you may say ahead of time, look, we're going to fire this person, and we just have concerns because this person made these statements in the past. That's a good time to reach out to the captain, to his unit. They can address it beforehand so we can look at the issue and, assess. We're not going to sit in the room with you as you fire somebody, but it's going to allow us to be able to handle it. The other one too is, with your captains, district captains and all, I get it. We all have employees. We all have members of our organizations, and sometimes they do stupid things. So in the environment that we're in today, somebody may make a political statement on their social media, and unfortunately, it's not just that person who made that issue that everybody will focus on, but what they'll end up doing is hunting down any little thing about that person. So if it ends up that person works for you and your business, your entity, well, then of course, humans being humans, they will attack you for it. So the one thing is, we will always say this: people have a constitutional right to protest, and they will constitutionally use that right in a manner that is safe and secure for everybody. What people do not have to do is a constitutional right to infringe on somebody else's constitutional rights. So we will arrest people immediately. We will handle situations appropriately. So that's the one thing we want to make sure everybody aware is, in this world that we live in today, not only do you deal with the day-to-day issues of your corporation, your business, what you have to deal with. However, your members of your organization, if they make some type of comment, they do something, unfortunately, it could affect your organization. So understand that, your sheriff's office will be right there with you. We will make sure that everything's safe. We'll make sure your operations are up and running. Nobody's going to shut down the street. Nobody's going to shut down the business. Nobody's going to say that they're not going to, cooperate with federal law enforcement, or it's not going to happen in Pasco County. So I get it. Your businesses are there to make money, to serve the public. We're going to make sure that they're able to make money and serve the public. That's our role and responsibility. The other one too is, if you email css@pascosheriff.org, going to get you in contact with Andrew Donawa. He's in charge of emergency management. So the one thing is, look, we don't want to come August when a storm's battling down and it's 7 days out, be like, okay, we're all going to work together and give us your points of contact. We want to build those relationships now. We all, because we're in Florida, we're constantly about hurricane. As many of you may have heard before, our biggest thing that we prepare for is the blackout. We prepare for the grid going down. We prepare for communications to go down, because hurricanes are horrible, and I feel horrible for those that lost lives and for those that lost property, and it's a big impact, and we're preparing for that, and we're always prepared for that. But what society is not truly prepared for is the blackout. And if you can prepare for the blackout, you can prepare for the grid going down, for comms going down, then a hurricane is much easier to deal with. So just want to make sure everybody aware is that we're consistently dealing with that. The other one is the cyber threats. So we work with our federal partners. If you get the cyber threats coming in, you get those attacks, we'll work hand in hand with our federal partners. We'll link you up, if you guys don't already have those connections, to make sure, that you have the best possible law enforcement capabilities there with you. The other one is Justin Weatherington's one of our captains too. And as I keep reiterating this email address, css@pascosheriff.org. So Captain Weatherington's team goes out there. It's part of community engagement. You need a presentation. You need somebody to talk about fraud. You need somebody to talk about safety issues. You need somebody to do a CPTED threat assessment to work with you, look at different things in your organization. So that's what his team is there for, is to assist you in providing greater safety to your team. So those are things that, I just want to make sure, css@pascosheriff.org. I want to keep reiterating it. Mention that you've been on this phone call or in this Zoom, and we'll make sure that you'll get all the contact information. You'll know who the points of contact are. The one thing we ask in return is, as I said earlier, we know who your person is today in February of 2026. In June of 2026, that person may change. So all we're asking is that you continuously update us as you move people around, update us, and we'll make sure that our points of contacts are continuously updated so you have that too. But I go back to it again. It's about, and I appreciate Bill and the EDC getting everybody together. It's about building these relationships, because we're all going to have bad days. We're all going to face a dilemma. God willing, it doesn't happen, and We pray to God that it, we don't have to deal with it, but we all know inevitably something's going to happen. We're going to have to communicate. So just make sure that you email css@pascosheriff.org. Give us your points of contact. We'll give you our points of contact. And if you ever need us for anything, please let us know. So appreciate it. God bless. And I'm handing off to Captain Kraus.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm gonna share my slides real quick and if I can find them. All right. All right, can everybody see that?
Yes.
So we're gonna give kind of a general overlay of, one second, let me try to get rid of some of this stuff so I can see it. We're going to give an overview of the current threat environment. So starting with Pasco County and then working globally from there, and things we're seeing from multiple other states and multiple other countries when they're dealing with these types of issues. So some of the primary threat vectors that we look at from the business perspective is cyber crimes targeting local business networks. We talk about fraud and financial crimes, organized retail theft, human trafficking linked to business corridors, and then kind of that environmental business continuity of threats. Overall, something that everybody's touched on from this point, but when we look at Pasco solely, about 17.5% all recorded events at a business for us is related to assault and battery. And then in the shoplifting space and narcotics, we continue to see this in the major retail stores. About 26% of that is consumed by shoplifting and narcotics. And then when we look at warrants and trespassing, which remains frequent across the board, 13% trespassing from significant locations like banking, and then about 10% of people or individuals are calling from the pharmaceutical world for warrants. And when we respond to that, and the reason the warrants is because a lot of times we get suspicious activity at pharmaceutical locations of individuals trying to obtain narcotics, whether by fake scripts or by nefarious means. So we're responding to these calls, and deputies are acting accordingly. When we look at the retail space exclusively, you're looking at about 42% of that activity is consumed by regional shopping centers from shoplifting and commercial burglary. And then when we look at financial crimes, ultimately it makes perfect sense that banks, credit unions, any kind of financial institution are focusing on counterfeiting, forgery, representing about 18% of the total reports that we get. And then we look at sector-specific vulnerabilities from pawn shops, dealing in stolen property, nightclubs and bars with high density and physical risk. When we see the nightclubs and bars, we see a lot of assault and battery. That's why you're seeing the levels of what we have, that 17.5%. And then making up about 60% of the events for the nightclubs, we focus a little bit further down into that granularity. This kind of gives you that top 10 kind of crime distribution throughout Pasco County. Again, you see assault and battery, it goes all the way down from something severe down to simple welfare checks, Baker Acts, Marksman's Acts, theft, grand theft. And then we float into crimes of the highest concentration of businesses. Of course, we do have a lot of retail here in Pasco County. So ultimately, it makes sense for us to look at shoplifting, the failure to return property, burglary businesses, counterfeit forgery, dealing with stealing property, trespass, scheme to defraud, open door, and then credit card fraud. So it's basically kind of aligning with what our business makeup looks like. And then now we're going to go kind of a little bit more globally and look at, how risk across the business domain was ranked in 2025 compared to 2026. So you notice cyber incidents have not changed as being the primary concern for businesses. What we see is, regardless of how small business is, you could have a simple LLC, you could have one employee, you can have hundreds of employees. Cyber incidents are critical. The most precious thing you guys have probably in your organization is not only your proprietary information for how your business runs and operates, but you also have a lot of PII from your employee set that people are looking to create synthetic identity fraud, to use your business as a fraud base, and it's moving a lot faster in the AI-driven world. Business interruption, we talk about artificial intelligence, it's a rapid adoption versus lack of governance right now in the AI space on how things are operating across the business domain. And then you look at your geopolitical instability. Now, I know sometimes, I'm just going to focus on Pasco. We tend here at the sheriff's office to look globally because we have a lot of incidents nationwide and overseas that have a significant cascading effect on our daily operations. And the sheriff mentioned earlier, talking a little bit about protest, it takes nothing for someone to look at your business, realize that you support a specific ideology or a specific, person, and go there and protest in front of your business. So we look at these geopolitical events in order to better plan for the future. And then we talked about natural disasters, right? This is not going to change. This is going to continue to move in the direction of we can't control the weather. We can't control storms, but what we can control is our planning and how we move forward with that. So on the cyber domain, you have kind of the primary victims where your ransomware, your data infiltration, your phishing, business email compromise, vendor compromise, credential theft, and weak authentication. This is why everybody tells you kind of have that good cyber hygiene in your businesses, right? Make sure your passwords are not password 123 across your very significant data sets, and be careful what you click on, right? So business email compromise is incredibly sophisticated now, right? It's not the old times where, your business was one, ABC, and then they had, a Z in there and had nothing to do with your business. Now they're doing social engineering and finding out who works at your business. They're targeting those specific people. They're sending those business emails to a specific target, a specific person, knowing that they have maybe a behavior to click on random things, or their social media output is saying they like puppies. So, and they click on everything puppy related. And if I send that to you, it could cause a malware incident. So if you look over to the right side, well, my right, depending on where you're at, the Florida DOH cyber attack in June 2026, right? It was a ransomware hub attack, 100 gigabytes of sensitive data stolen, FDLE notified, breach confirmed August 2024. Data includes social securities, passports, and medical info. And then we look at an Orlando nonprofit, right? 3.6 million stolen via an account takeover. Charges as laundering, wire fraud, identity theft. So think of the significance. How many of you guys can lose $3.6 million on a regular basis? Major companies usually have a little bit more overhead. Smaller businesses cannot afford to lose so much money via a cyber attack. We talk about the AI arms race. This is one of the things that people need to be very, very mindful of. Days of people calling you in broken English and not being able to speak through the country that they're trying to defraud is pretty much over. The way they can use AI now to speak perfect English and to trick individuals into giving up significant data, or like I said, clicking on an email, or providing money or cash to a cryptocurrency ATM is pretty significant and easy these days. The people doing cyber fraud do not have to be the smartest people in the room. They just have to read instructions off the internet. So that's a very scary process in what we're seeing. And there's been significant cyber attacks throughout, and then we can provide some of those in later calls. But ransomware 3.0, the triple extortion, where we talk about cyber gangs and how they've been beyond. This is an enterprise. Certain places overseas, from India and Africa and Europe, have created complete organized fraud rings in order to look at encrypting your data, threatening to leak sensitive customer data, and directly contacting the victim's client or vendors to force payment. And then we look at supply chain vulnerability. Anybody in the manufacturing realm should probably be significantly looking at this. Anybody that buys laptops, anybody that buys any kind of electronics, your supply chain is critical. Where did your stuff come from? How do you know there's no vulnerabilities in there, right? Is the chip different from what you ordered? So this is where your IT guys, your cybersecurity experts. Now it's been a little bit easier for small businesses to have cybersecurity teams come in at a low cost to ensure they can secure your businesses a little bit better. We move fraud and financial crime. We talk about embezzlement, escrow manipulation, contractor fraud, loan investment scams. Again, this is that 60,000 foot level. There's so much more that we look at. But if you take a look at some of the examples where we look at Sinista Realty fraud, Michael Bundy arrested, charges a scheme to defraud over 100K. He had 40 victims with $400,000 confirmed stolen proceeds. And then you have Pasco contractor fraud, which we have unlicensed contractors that deal with this a lot. We have a whole team that goes out and we do stings to kind of limit or mitigate the risk of having contractor fraud. But insurance fraud, grand theft, 35K or more. This is your roof funding scams, the work's never completed. This happens more frequently than you think. And it's in part because people don't hit that pause button for a second and realize something's not right, where, most roofs cost anywhere from $15,000 to $30,000. And this person's saying I can do it for $8,000. People need to be very cautious. And then the Tampa Bay sneaker cruise, where you're talking about rooftop mall entries and your $1 million in sneakers and electronics stolen. These are what we call your organized crime rings. And the fraud is deployed very rapidly.